Introduction to Hogwarts. People in the wizarding world are in a brief period of peace between two wars, thinking that danger will never come again. But beneath the calm surface, the dark tide has begun to stir. After many years, Lynn Eric returned to Hogwarts with his magic and pursuit, walking into the center of the vortex. In a brand new identity. When ancient magic, dormant in history, enters reality, everything will be different. Chapter 1. Moscow is raining. You are listening at novelfull.audio. July 4, 1992, Moscow, Saturday. Although destruction is brief, the process of extension is long. The powerful existence that once intimidated the entire world has collapsed with a loud bang, completely collapsing but not overnight. The passers-by walked hurriedly, their faces shrouded in dark clouds, like the drizzle. Although it was summer, it was gloomy and slightly cold. A building with classical aesthetics stands on the street corner, but it seems as if it doesn't exist in the world at all, just like air. A faint wave of magic envelopes here, although it is only a short distance away, it is two worlds for ordinary people who do not understand magic. A man and a woman slowly walked out of it. Mr. Eric, if you still need anything, please feel free to contact me. The Department of Classics Management always welcomes you. A woman in her 50s smiled obsequiously, spoke humbly, and respectfully delivered a suitcase. Thank you, Ms. Lydia. I will come again as long as the price is suitable. You can call me Lynn directly next time. The young man named Lynn spoke with no foreign accent, his handsome face showing an impeccable smile, polite and sincere. Taking the box, he felt the weight that the seamless stretching spell could not completely erase. He nodded satisfactorily and strode into the crowd. For a long time, the woman who had watched him go turned around and pondered in her heart how to continue to make a fortune. There are not many such generous customers, but it is too rare in this era. Lynn didn't know or care about her thoughts, he just silently walked towards the suburbs carrying a suitcase. This classic book, which has been passed down from the Middle Ages to the present day but was sold at a low price due to the turbulent situation, is a top-secret treasure of the Ministry of Magic in the country. Today, it is only sold for a few thousand gallons, which is more precious and cheaper than the harvest in Eastern Europe in the past 2 years. It's not in vain for him to go all the way. Calming his mind, he slowly walked into a small alley, but suddenly stopped and said without looking back. Demetrius, what's going on after all this time? Magnetic sounds echoed in the alley. In a moment, a sturdy figure walked out from the corner, with a clear expression on its face. Lynn Eric, put down the stolen classics and leave. Contrary to the rough appearance, the person in front of me, although dressed in rags, still carries the calmness and composure honed by time. Dmitry Mikhailov, former director of the Auror Office of the Ministry of Magic, has now lost all his positions. The surging magic condensed at the top of the wand, and the evil curse was ready to be unleashed. The threat was self-evident. You misunderstood. This transfer certificate is authorized by the new Ministry of Magic, and the official seal on it is very clear. Upon hearing this, Lynn calmly took out parchment and spread it out in front of the other person. However, before he could finish speaking, 2 cold lights came cunningly from behind him, crashing into an invisible light curtain and scattering into dots of light. The automatically triggered advanced armor spells were easily blocked, without allowing them to have any effect, except for adding a touch of gloom to Lynn's face. His smile gradually faded away. 2 men who looked younger than Demetrius came from behind with their bags sandwiched between them. They were also Aurora, with some fame in Eastern Europe and remarkable achievements. You are indeed there, but I don't like this way of greeting. Lynn's voice was calm and full of coldness. You are no longer Aurora, and even wanted criminals. Robbery is understandable. What is the purpose of this painting? The deep eyes, like the night sky, were filled with displeasure but more curiosity. This is the wealth of the country, and no one has the right to sell it at a low price or take it away, Demetrius said decisively. Leave the box and leave our country. I know you're a tough guy, but this is 3-on-1. 3-on-1, Lynn wearily put down the suitcase, gathered up his wet hair from the rain, and smiled meaningfully. Are you sure? Before he could finish speaking, 2 red lights shot out from his fingertips. Bang! Like a heavy hammer falling on their chest, the 2 well-trained senior Aurors instantly lost control of their bodies. Until their consciousness became blurred, a deep red color appeared in their field of vision, but their perspective began to sink into darkness. Textbook-like casting without a wand, even without the blessing of a wand, is swift and fierce. On the left wrist, a slender bracelet shimmered, and a slender wand appeared out of thin air. Now it's 1.1, Lynn said lightly. Using old intelligence is not a wise choice. Demetrius was sweating profusely, feeling a crisis of life and death beyond his control. Even so, he is not prepared to back down. Faint and fall to the ground. A thick red beam gushed out, and he took the initiative to launch an attack. Lynn cleverly dodged on his side, but his gaze also deviated. Seizing the opportunity, Demetrius never stopped and slashed with his wand. A beam of light rushed in, and the broken stones in various parts of the alley took advantage of the opportunity to take off, transforming into sharp stone cones under the drive of the transformation technique and crashing down again. Combination offensive is not glamorous, but very practical. Over the past decade, countless black wizards around the world have fallen under these 3 axes. But Lynn just calmly raised his wand without reciting a curse, waving it lightly. The hard brick and stone ground suddenly cracked, and the bricks soared into the air, quickly transforming into a delicate shield blocking in front of them. The surging magic lingers on it. Bang! In the collision, the stone coned into a cloud of powder, scattered all over the ground. At the same time, a silver light rose from the puddle under Demetrius's feet without any warning. However, in an instant, the old spicy Aurora, who had prepared countless henchmen, was frozen inside and turned into an ice sculpture. The rain fell and made a faint rustling sound. The cold ice is very thin, but it cannot break free no matter what. All he could move was his eyes, and all his hind hands were meaningless. A few years ago, I told you that everything you wanted to keep has been destroyed, just like when you were born decades ago. Your ideals and loyalty make me respect you, but it has found the wrong partner. Lynn walked up and said in a regretful low voice. The cold ice shattered in response, with the tip of the staff resting on his abdomen. It's over, except for your weapon. The light flashed by, and the tall figure of Yu reading www.uukangshu.net collided with the corner of the wall. The wand spun and fell into Lynn's hand. The outcome has been decided. They will wake up in 2 minutes, and Auror is expected to arrive in 5 minutes. You need to hurry up. Picking up the suitcase, Lynn casually threw back his wand and waved goodbye. Good luck, we will meet again. You understand what I mean, goodbye. You. Demetrius collapsed against the wall, feeling a chilling chill. He struggled to raise his hand, trying to pick up the wand that had fallen to the ground, but could only watch Lynn disappear into the alley as a silhouette. His face was filled with regret and unwillingness, but more so with deep disillusionment. Moscow is raining, or in other words, crying. For a future where there is no visible path ahead. And irreparable loss. That night, in Birmingham, Edgbaston. At the beginning of the Lantern Festival, it is the time for this city of multicultural integration and infiltration to awaken. Spanning thousands of kilometers of long distance, Lynn N finally returned to a familiar place after a tiring journey. Returning home, he dived into the study without packing his luggage and walked straight to the desk by the window. Rows of text that only he could see flickered before his eyes. The proficiency of the coma curse cannot be improved temporarily. Proficiency in Metamorphosis +2, Rune Proficiency +1, the proficiency of the Handover spell cannot be improved temporarily. Oh, there are so many cars. Looking out the window at the bustling traffic and crowds, Lynn tidied up the scattered parchment scrolls on the table and sighed softly, "It's a perfect day." The ending is gently raised, with a hint of joy and playfulness. Chapter 2. The Student Era of War and Chaos. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Sure enough, it still doesn't work. Looking at the still messy table, Lynn closed his eyes and stretched his arms. At this moment, the quiet and dim house suddenly came to life. The suitcase, which was lying still on the ground, floated and flew to the desk, automatically opening. Rolls of parchment, which seemed to still carry the fragrance of ink, were neatly stacked. The appropriate suit and shirt on the body automatically took off and hung in the already opened wardrobe, with a small brush rising up in the air, sweeping away the already small amount of dust. The deep purple nightgown rushed over and gently draped over him, warm and comfortable. With a snap of fingers, soothing music sounded, and there seemed to be something moving in the kitchen. In no time, a cup of green tea with a light aroma had already floated in front of him. Magic is really convenient, it's not suitable for me to do manual work or something. Sipping the refreshing aroma of tea, Lynn grinned and leaned back in his chair, carefree. It's been several years since I accidentally started. There's always a feeling of getting old, he muttered slightly low as his amber eyes sparkled with a clear color, thinking of the iconic smoggy days of the 1960s in England when he first came to this world. The world in front of him also became somewhat blurred. My mood is gradually drifting, and it's hard to find a trace. Lynn Eric is a time traveler, but the timeline is different from most of his peers. More than a decade earlier. From 1963 to 1974, he lived in an orphanage in Birmingham, with an unknown background and only a note with his name written on it. With his early wisdom and eloquence, he won the love of most people and used the profits of history to plan an impeccable life trajectory. But a admission notice with a gorgeous coat of arms and a middle-aged chubby woman visiting changed everything. From the moment he opened the envelope, a brand new door opened in his spiritual world. The restless magic awakened the dormant existence after a long accumulation. A panel with simple functions but extremely rough effects. Accumulate proficiency and improve the level of magic. At the moment of receiving the wand, the level of magic knowledge is determined as the benchmark of 0, and growth begins. After countless exercises, the spells he learned can be upgraded and undergo a qualitative change. The progress of magic spells and cognitive enhancement can also provide feedback on the accumulation of magical knowledge from 2 dimensions. Cyclic alternation and mutual promotion. But such an improvement is not without limitations. The further you go, the more difficult it becomes. The difficulty is not the curse, but the exponentially increasing knowledge of magic. The upper limit of a curse depends on the level of magical knowledge, which can be surpassed but cannot be infinitely improved. The level 0 magic theory can only support level 1 spells, with very few exceptions. But it is already precious. In this bloody and vague era, this is his greatest reliance. Until today, the progress of magical knowledge has slowed down to an alarming level, and the progress in various aspects has also been slowed down. However, in his eyes, the effect of this long-time partner is still remarkable. Even more so, it becomes infinitely useful. With a confident smile, he recalled the past. About his chaotic student days. And the magnificent first half of my life. Lynn never denies being a slightly ambitious person. This may be a characteristic of every early-witted person, after all, time favors them. He also never hesitates to speculate on the wizarding world of this era with the greatest malice, especially the supporters and minions of the Dark Lord, those pure-blooded supporters. In the first 11 years of his life, he never imagined that he would come to this world. The memories of the past life have long been blurred, and even after racking our brains, we can only recall the general framework and a few details. After all, the most beloved story is ultimately a story, and the span of 10 years is too long. But one thing he remembers clearly. Wizarding wars are extremely dangerous. Having an unknown background, no foundation, and a hidden secret in his heart, his sense of security has plummeted to the freezing point. Regardless of ambition, his basic desire to save his life alone has ignited an unprecedented drive. From Diagon Alley to Hogwarts, in a month, he eagerly read all the textbooks he could find. Even Professor Sprout's scholarship was almost spent, turning into second-hand books and pure knowledge, pouring into his mind. In just 5 weeks, his magical knowledge had completed its initial accumulation, approaching level 2. The Iron Armor Curse and the Binding Curse, the two simplest combat spells, have also reached level 2 in all-night asceticism, even more proficient than the simple Floating Curse and basic Transformation Curse. Nevertheless, he still hopes to be as low-key as possible and strive for more development time. But reality often does not give people the opportunity to choose. Especially in the face of some principled issues. Since the resounding sound of Hufflepuff, his student days have been turbulent. In 1974, it was the turning point of the First Wizarding War from dark to light. Having been stuck in a hat for 5 minutes between Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff, even if he wants to be transparent, it's not easy for him. Before the full month of enrollment, conflicts erupted in the castle courtyard. More than a dozen pure-blooded little wizards blocked a large number of Muggle-born wizards who were just new to magic. Most of whom were new to Hufflepuff. The initial gap is the largest. Surrounding classmates trembled with fear. The prefects who sheltered everyone happened to be absent. Dirt and obscene language are constantly heard. The cursed light on the wand is particularly dazzling. Lynn realized that he was indeed a Hufflepuff and couldn't tolerate bullying the weak. Racing against time and not forgetting to read while walking, he put away his books and raised his wand. Lynn will never forget the wonderful expression on Professor Sprout's face at that time in his lifetime. 12 pure-blooded little wizards were neatly planted in the fountain, soaked all over, but unable to move a single finger. Then I lay down in the medical room for 7 days. The little wizard from Muggle background was only scratched by a few people. This achievement has intimidated the whole school and quickly made him a prominent figure in this class. At the same time, he became a thorn in the side of the pure-blooded faction led by Slytherin. But he didn't regret it, and even had a bit of unexpected excitement. At that time, people still didn't know what would happen in the following years. The Wizarding War is becoming increasingly intense, and Hogwarts cannot afford a peaceful desk. Even with Dumbledore in place, the battle continued to spread, and radical pure-blood supporters became increasingly rampant. From the same grade to the higher grades, Lynn's life became thrilling and exciting. But he enjoys it. Because he found that he had more proficiency in defeating opponents in battle compared to monotonous training. In just the first 3 years, the senior students who fell in his hands could line up all the way from Hogwarts to the Duke of Honey. The number of Muggles and mixed-race wizards gathering around him has also rapidly increased, seeking both shelter and self-reliance. His reputation is not only a lifelong shame for many people, but also a nightmare. Fame naturally comes at a cost. To prevent retaliation, he hardly ever leaves school, and during holidays, he is granted special work-study programs. He buys books on behalf of Professor Sprout. But that's not a bad thing either. In those years, even ordinary Muggle-born wizards occasionally suffered casualties, making it even more difficult for retired scholars to count. The essence of the First Wizarding War was not only the pursuit of absolute power and immortality by the Dark Lord, but also a pure-blooded radical war against Muggles and Muggle-born wizards, and even directly against the secret law. No one can be alone, including Lynn. The incident occurred in the summer of 1977. A letter disrupted his plan. The orphanage director, Mrs. Delena, who had given him a lot of help when he was young, passed away due to illness. On his final journey to see off his benefactor from school, 5 Death Eaters received news and launched a surprise attack on him. At that time, he was already extraordinary in strength, sweeping across the school and capable of standing out on his own. But the Death Eaters were already prepared. Because the leader's name is Bellatrix. At only in her 20s, she was already one of the most important minions of the Black Demon King at that time, with strong magical power and ruthless methods. In just a moment, he was alone and plunged into a desperate situation. Fortunately, there is no such thing as a never-ending path. In the crisis, a young couple with strong magic appeared and fought alongside Lynn, defeating the Death Eaters. A special friendship began here, and later on, even Lynn's vacation had an additional destination. After that, the pure-blooded family ushered in the era of disaster at Hogwarts. Until he left the campus, and then, bang, a muffled sound pulled Lynn's thoughts back to reality. There is another book on the table. Ah. Lynn laughed dumbfounded, put down the bottom teacup, waved his wand, and restored the tabletop to its original state. Memories also temporarily come to an end. He lowered his head and looked at the magic book that had just been suppressed, showing a satisfied smile. Igor's medical magic letters. This is a treasure renowned in Eastern Europe, and even in legends, it records the in-depth exploration and practice of ancient medical magic. The intricate patterns tell the weight of history. Among all the classics, its value is the highest, even exceeding the sum of all others. It's not too late yet. Lynn took out the good wine he bought in Moscow and prepared to study it with enthusiasm. But as soon as I opened the homepage, there was movement coming from outside the window. Doo-doo-doo-doo. Looking up, an owl was persistently tapping on the window, with a small envelope hanging from its feet. Chapter 3. Hogwarts and Busbarton. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Duo. The sharp beak of the curved hook lightly tapped, and the messenger who came from afar was fighting against the owl's food piled up in a small hill. After touching the owl, Lynn put down the classics and opened the letter. Dear Mr. Lynn Eric, we are honored to invite you to become a professor of the Defense Against Dark Arts course at our college. If you are interested in teaching, please reply with the negotiation time, and we will visit you at that time. Vice Principal, female, Maliva McGonagall. The letter doesn't last long, just a few words, and with a glance, it's over. It's the same thing again. Lynn muttered, casually throwing the letter into the fireplace and flicking a flame from his fingertips. Out of the corner of my eye, I casually glanced over at a corner of the study. Inside the cabinet, a mountain of test papers had fallen into a thin layer of dust, making me sigh. In addition to his dual identities as a wealthy and powerful wizard and a traveler, he also had an identity that lasted for 3 years. A professor of ancient magic at Busbarton. For teachers, grading papers is always a hassle. Although Busbarton students are eye-catching and mostly very hard-working, and he personally taught them with a solid foundation, this still does not affect his headache when he sees the final exam paper. Fortunately, it's been the last year, and this time the old man has no reason to tie me up. Thinking that he could finally be liberated, he smiled with curved eyebrows and eyes. But soon, the smile became stiff and gradually disappeared. Ah, this terrible old man. In a mournful murmur, he pulled out parchment and wrote a polite refusal letter with a pen, tying it to the feet of an owl. Thank you very much, little one. Let's go another trip. After masturbating the owl's little brain again, Lynn watched as it disappeared into the night sky, full of food and drink, feeling dejected. He is not interested in reading magic books today. With a gentle wave of the wand, the room fell into darkness. Life returns to tranquility. Until a week later, Lynn finished studying this obscure classic and completed his final teaching task in Busbarton, but the owl did not come back. He got up early that day, tidied up, and went out dressed neatly. First, she laid a bouquet of flowers at the cemetery for Dorina, who could almost be considered her foster mother, and then strolled through the slightly quiet streets due to the weekend. He walked to the lush urban park and found an empty corner, imagining the beautiful castle standing on the snowy peak. He then activated his instinctive phantom movement. Disappeared in just an instant. It takes thousands of kilometers to walk. Until the distant southern part of France, the Pyrenees Mountains. Busbarton has a history almost as long as Hogwarts, and has also produced countless heroes, renowned in Europe. During the summer vacation, there were not many students left in the school, and the campus welcomed a brief tranquility. In the lush courtyard, tall figures sit quietly on custom-made oversized seats, waiting. Today is the agreed negotiation time, and Mrs. Maxim has brought a special guest. It wasn't long, 10 minutes earlier than agreed, and the spatial fluctuations intensified. However, in a blink of an eye, Lynn appeared in the center of the courtyard, dressed in a light gray suit. Even his carefully groomed hair was not a bit messy. Precise phantom manifestation, Lynn. Mrs. Maxim praised with a smile, slowly stood up, and extended her big hand. You really like Muggle style, and it's really beautiful. Good morning, ma'am, you're too polite. Lin Enyang looked up at the respected principal who had been desperately seeking the development of the school. He politely bowed and looked at the girl not far away. Miss Draker, your written test score is also full marks, as always excellent. Thank you, Professor Eric. With sparkling silver eyes, Hibiscus walked up happily and asked, do you really not want to stay? Many students hope to continue learning from you. Accompanied by a slightly hoarse and charming voice, the waterfall like long hair gently sways. Lynn knew Mrs. Maxim's intentions. It is not surprising to have one's most admired student become a lobbyist. Lynn, your achievements in the past 3 years are obvious to all, and I really hope you can stay. Mrs. Maxim sincerely invited, Nico too. I have always been very grateful for your trust and support, Lin Enwen said calmly, blinking at Farong. But now that the teaching system for ancient magic classes has been established, I think it is indeed time to separate. I'm sorry. I have already talked to Nico a while ago, and if there is anything I can do for the school in the future, you can contact me anytime. Professor Eric. Farong frowned, feeling somewhat lost and sad. Well, I understand now. Upon hearing that Nicolo May did not object, Mrs. Maxim could only nod regretfully and no longer insist. Then I can only wish you all the best, Lynn. Can you recommend a successor for me? I trust your judgment. Why don't you come to the office and have a chat? Of course, Lynn said with a smile, I haven't had the good wine you've collected in some time. I need to enjoy it today. As for the candidate, there is indeed one. In a moment of laughter, 3 people with distinct heights walked side by side through the garden and into the small yet exceptionally exquisite castle. I remember Miss Fox was your classmate. She studied in Ravenclaw back then, right? You often work together, and I heard she's been in Finland recently. In the office, listening to Lynn's proposal for a successor, Mrs. Maxim was lost in thought. Unexpectedly, within reason. Yes, Euphemia's expertise in the field of Lucerne magic is no less than mine. Miss Drackle and her team will definitely be able to adapt well to her course. Lynn smiled and nodded, savoring Mrs. Maxim's collection of wine, looking at Hibiscus, and added, Miss Drackle should have the most say in this. She has attended Euphemia's class before. Yes, madam. UU reading www.uukangshu.net. Farong's mood was still a bit low, but she nodded obediently. Proud as she could not deny, Ms. Euphemia Fox, who had coached her on rune knowledge, was a true genius with a profound knowledge beyond her age and an unfathomable foundation in magic. Not even inferior to his most admired professor, but also his long-time research partner, the two of them have a perfect understanding. Since it's your recommendation, I completely trust it. I will ask her to schedule a time to discuss it in detail, Lynn. Mrs. Maxim smiled and took out the letter paper with the Busbarton emblem from the drawer, then started writing on the spot. I think she's also willing to change the pace of life. Lynn stood up and thanked while tidying up, slightly bowing. Thank you for your hospitality and 3 years of care. The exam papers and transcripts for this semester can be mailed in 3 days. Please allow me to leave first. Just a moment, Lynn. Just as Lynn was about to leave, Mrs. Maxim suddenly reached out her hand and said with a smile, "Actually, there is another guest today who has been waiting for you for quite some time." Guest. I don't seem to have anything today. Good morning, Lynn. Please forgive me for coming uninvited. Would it be convenient for you to talk to me? Just as Lynn was speaking, an old but familiar voice rang outside the principal's room. Before he could finish speaking, a tall and slender figure squeezed in from the door. The silver-white long hair and beard that almost hung down to the waist, almost visible to everyone, were blue and wise eyes, as well as the tall yet twisted nose bridge. Extremely distinctive physical features. Here comes the greatest white wizard in the world, Albus Dumbledore. It's also the old principal that Lynn hasn't seen in a long time. Chapter 4. The Dusty Past. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the quiet office, only Dumbledore and Lynn were left. In order to leave time for guests who came from afar, Mrs. Maxim left here with her still somewhat reluctant Hibiscus. This is a high level of courtesy, out of respect and trust in Dumbledore. It just doesn't necessarily make Lynn happy. He pursed his lips, and the subtle body language revealed that his mood was rapidly becoming less beautiful, but rather transformed into a serious business. And a slight coldness. Hello, Principal Dumbledore, this did surprise me a bit. It's been a long time since we last met. The voice without any emotional fluctuations broke the slightly awkward silence. I think so, Lynn. It's been 4 years since our last meeting, when we presented your first-class Merlin order. Ignoring Lynn's estrangement, Dumbledore picked up the hot chocolate specially prepared by Mrs. Maxim and took a sip, smiling kindly. Your memory is indeed exceptional. Lynn nodded indifferently, and the fine wine in his glass made him lose interest. He said straightforwardly, I think Professor Sprout must have told you about today's event. I don't know what I can do for you. Indeed, it's Pomona, but today I just want to take a look at the best graduates of Hufflepuff. Please forgive me, once people get old, they will always be immersed in memories. Dumbledore looked at Lynn gently, his words filled with warmth that could melt the frost, like a kind old man and a kind elder sitting by the fireplace. Although Lynn knew that this greatest white wizard was not like that. But as the saying goes, reaching out and not hitting the smiling person, Dumbledore's attitude made him slightly lower his guard and his face softened. I understand what you mean, but I'm not interested in defense against dark arts and I don't want to personally experience the curse of that noseless old man, even though he's just a broken wandering soul right now. I thought with your current magic, you wouldn't be afraid of him anymore. Dumbledore seemed a bit surprised, his tone rising. At least those who came to the strange family should agree with my point of view. Oh. Did you find the ability to communicate with the underworld? Or whose unborn child did Bellatrix give birth to, giving the extinct Lestrange family a new person to talk to? Lynn chuckled. Behind their plain and relaxed words was a bloody list. Unlike the harmless appearance of humans and animals at this moment, Lynn N., who had just graduated from Hogwarts 11 years ago, also had blood on his hands. Especially the blood of one of the so-called pure blood 20.8 families, the Raven clan Lestrange family, which only has its own appearance. In the month after Voldemort's downfall, this pure-blooded family, known for its loyalty and cruelty, suffered destruction. In addition to the remote patrilineal lineage of Rita Lestrange, who sacrificed herself in the fight against Grindelwald, including the infamous Lestrange brothers, the vast family became extinct in Lynn's hands and disappeared into the long river of history, turning into an inconspicuous footnote. The Bloody November. But this history that shocked all pure-blood families was just a joke in front of Lynn and Dumbledore. After all, one was the party involved, and the other specifically communicated with the then Minister of Magic, Millicent Barnard, to the point where Auror, led by Elasto Moody, even avoided it. Even Dumbledore enthusiastically opened a package of candies, ate one himself, and then handed it over. So you're not afraid of him, let alone his servants. Remembering the sweetness in his mouth, Dumbledore squinted his eyes with satisfaction and whispered, maybe it was because of Nico a few years ago, but now. I'm not afraid, but it's always a bit troublesome. As you know, I don't like dealing with curses, they waste a lot of time. Lynn frowned slightly. The candy he had eaten was not sweet, but sour to the point of biting his teeth. Luck is still not good as usual. There is an undeniable reason why time is so precious to every wizard, even for an elderly person like me who is on the brink of death. Watching Lynn try to maintain his unchanged expression, Dumbledore smiled awkwardly and changed his tone. Since this doesn't work, are you interested in considering another teaching position? Another one? Lynn asked with uncertainty, recalling the current situation of Hogwarts teacher. You're not talking about protecting magical creatures, are you? My limbs and I have a good relationship, and we don't plan to say goodbye so early. Ha! Of course not, Professor Ketterborn has found a suitable successor. Dumbledore smiled happily, we hope to hire another discipline, ancient ruin. Lynn seemed to have met this kind-looking old man before him for the first time, yet he always had 10,000 calculations in his heart. Your research on ancient magic has had a great influence in various countries, especially in the initial article, The Application of Luther's Charm. Nico and the French Ministry of Magic acted quickly, so Busbarton took the lead. Dumbledore made no secret of his admiration, placing his hands crossed on the table and his deep eyes filled with sincerity. Britain has also passed a teaching law this year, renaming Ancient Ruin as Magic and Ancient Magic and making it a compulsory course. If you are willing, Professor Barbling would love to teach with you. Magic and Ancient Magic. Lynn was slightly surprised. Fuji didn't drag him down, it's really rare. Connolly is just a bit flamboyant, not bad in nature. He has also put in a lot of effort, Dumbledore said calmly. Perhaps, Lynn remained noncommittal. Staring at those eyes that were once particularly wary, but now they can still be indifferent, his gaze hides a sharp edge. To be frank, I don't like your savior cultivation plan, nor do I like what happened this year. He intensified his tone and said, I have always disliked that small gang of James Potter who enjoys campus bullying, but he died heroically after all, and the child is innocent, even though there is a sleeping monster living in his head. You. Dumbledore's pupils contracted slightly, and for the first time, he lost the calmness of being in control. But soon, this shock was hidden by him. I completely agree with the decision of the Sorting Hat to assign you to Heckpack now. Drink all the hot chocolate in one gulp, said Dumbledore solemnly. Please believe that I am not looking for a nanny for that child, but rather hoping that he will have a good teacher and be on the right track in life, not just against Tom. He also has a long life. You're not that kind of person, Professor Dumbledore. As far as I know, for the prophecy of that fortune-telling madwoman, anyone's life can be spared. Including yourself. That's why I'm still sitting here. I respect you, but I don't support you. Lynn's attitude was cold, and his sharp words pierced Dumbledore's mind. Lynn, I've been very sorry about their situation. The old man showed rare loneliness and self-blame, but at that time, you were talking to the prodigal master of magic potions who wouldn't exchange gold. Lynn's eyes flickered with a hint of unwillingness. They saved my life, and this matter is far from over. But it has nothing to do with you, it's just that my skills are not good. Child, I understand your feelings, Dumbledore said bitterly. I have also lost important friends. The two of them remained silent at the same time, and the deliberately buried yet ultimately uncovered memory left a heavy heart. What can we do now? It's not too late, Dumbledore said slowly after a long pause. The door to Hogwarts has always been open to you. You know, that person has come back, but I'm already too old. The earnest gaze touched Lynn's heart. Nearly 20 years ago, it was the tall figure of the old man who sheltered him from the wind and rain while still at Hogwarts. N, 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 N. After a long period of contemplation, he stood up and left, whispering, "I'm free next Wednesday to visit Professor Sprout." Of course. Pomona must be very happy. The disappointment on Dumbledore's face swept away, replaced by an undisguised joy. "Hagrid has a bottle of good wine, you will like it." As Lynn N walked away quickly, the old man laughed with relief. Chapter 5. Saint Mango. You are listening at novelfull.audio. On Sunday, July 12, it rained lightly in London. Holding a handful of fresh violets, Lynn, who had returned from France, stood alone in front of the Chean Baptist department store, looking at the wooden sign in front of the closed decoration and the ugly and comical dummy in front of the glass window, feeling a bit suffocated. The fact that Dumbledore played the emotional card made him quite unhappy. But even though his words have already been spoken, going back is not his style. "I can only secretly regret being calculated by this old and refined old man again." Smelling the unique fragrance of violet, he calmed down and said to the dummy, "Hello, please open the door for me." The words with faint magic fell, and the dummy nodded slightly, waving its already connected fingers. Lynn was familiar with the road, just like crossing the 9 3/4 platform while studying, taking big strides forward, passing through the glass wall, and the world in front of him immediately changed. This is the largest comprehensive magical injury hospital in the UK and even Europe, San Mango. Although not a patient, the therapists here are no strangers to Lynn N. From the equipment accident department on the first floor to the magic damage department on the 5th floor, passers-by warmly greeted him. Some of them were his classmates, some were junior members of the college, and many came from Muggle backgrounds. With their meticulous, studious, and diligent style, they were well suited to work in the magic hospital, and their influence grew day by day. Looking at these old classmates, especially many old friends who had received his help in bullying, Lynn smiled and responded one by one, occasionally stopping to chat and finally arriving at his destination for a long time. Charm Damage Department, number 49. Jenna's Hitch Ward. His old friends, Frank and Alice Longbottom, live here. It has been almost 11 years. "Lynn, could you please come over frequently and let Amanda and her team take care of you so much? I don't know how to thank you." Seeing Lynn skillfully replace the slightly wilted bouquet in the vase and insert the violet she brought, Mrs. Augusta Longbottom quickly stepped forward and pulled him to sit by the hospital bed, her words filled with sighs. "Friends should have supported each other," Frank said many times, didn't he? Lynn looked at the two old friends sitting in bed with a haggard expression. "It wasn't because they helped each other back then, and I wouldn't be who I am today." As he spoke, he patted Mrs. Longbottom's old hand and looked at the timid Neville, smiling, saying, "There's good news. I went to Russia and got an ancient magic book, which may be effective for Frank and the others. Child, it's too chaotic and dangerous over there." Mrs. Longbottom was overjoyed upon hearing this, but quickly became serious. She grabbed Lynn's hand with resentment and care. After spending more than a decade together, she almost watched Lynn grow up. "Don't worry, I have a plan in mind. The magic I obtained from my last trip to Poland was of some use, and I believe they will recover it." Lynn N was already accustomed to caring about the elderly snagging, and he didn't feel troubled. Instead, he felt a warmth that was almost familial. But he didn't take it to heart either, confidently speaking. In the upheaval that swept through half of the world and even plunged the Wizarding Society into turmoil, he had already done countless things a week ago without a single mistake. His strong strength is naturally on one hand, and on the other hand, he always maintains restraint. He selects magic that is mainly medical and has strong knowledge but is not highly valued, which has not caused collective resistance from those magic families with a long history of inheritance. Hungary, Poland, Lithuania, Bulgaria. One ancient yet gradually weakening family after another was defeated by his gold dollar offensive and hidden threats. One ancient magic scripture after another, which has long been lost and can only be suppressed in the deepest part of the family treasury, has become his heritage. The wealth accumulated by the Lestrange family over thousands of years has turned into their alternative path of redemption in Cologne. In a few words, he fooled the old man and affectionately touched Neville's head. Lynn slowly walked over to Frank, who had barely slept, and raised his wand, saying in standard Old Rose language, "In the name of Igor, the verdant soul." The emerald green light gushed out from the tip of the wand, transforming into a slender band of light that surrounded Frank and Alice's bodies. After thousands of years, the wizard and his profound magic hidden behind the scenes in King Igor's expeditions and legendary stories reappear in this mysterious and gradually fading world. Not only that, a small and exquisite letter of Lewin also condensed in the air, emitting soft magical waves. Lynn. In a daze, Frank, who was asleep, slowly opened his eyes. In his eyes, which were always filled with pain due to the torment of the diamond heart curse, a rational glow appeared for a long time, although it flickered and passed, and even Lynn's name could not be said. Alice instinctively grabbed the candy paper in her hand, her eyes filled with confusion and tenderness. She glanced at her own son. "Sorry, I think my strength may not be enough." After a while, Lynn sat heavily beside the hospital bed, panting heavily and his eyes filled with regret. In that moment, he had already felt the soul of his friend, but ultimately lost his way in the stormy waves of the spiritual world and missed his friend waiting for rescue. The combination of ancient Ross magic and Rune of Rune gave him powerful power. But there is also a cost. Huge consumption and the risk of losing control at any time. Neville sat silently next to Alice, still holding the crumpled candy paper in her hand that had already been pinched by her mother. Augusta shed his disguised harshness and revealed rare kindness, while caressing Neville's back and looking at Lynn, whose forehead was already sweating, and said softly, "You don't need to apologize, Lynn. You've done a great job, at least we've seen hope, haven't you? You've been supporting us, as well as Frank and Alice." "I haven't done enough yet." Lynn's face was solemn, as he looked at Frank's haggard face and increasingly thin body. Unconsciously, he clenched his fist, maybe trying a few more times would have a better effect. "When Amanda comes later, I will talk to her. Do you think I'm a monster like you and Faye, Lynn?" Before she could finish speaking, Amanda, dressed in a dark green robe, walked in with a loud squeak and complained helplessly. "You can be a person, old classmate. I haven't fully mastered the spell you taught me last time until now. If I could learn so quickly, the Dean of San Mango should just hand it over to me." Scratching his head in a casual manner, Lynn said, "I believe you can become the Dean in the future, Dean Sever. Don't be so talkative with me." Amanda rolled her eyes in anger and walked over to the hospital bed. She opened Frank's eyelids and carefully checked, confirming everything was correct before finally letting out a sigh of relief. UU reading www.uukangshu.net. In my previous life, I had bad luck. Every time I had to stand guard for you, this reckless guy. This is a bit harsh, Lynn covered his chest. I'm sad, there's nothing like a meal that can't be cured. His response was the disdainful gaze of his old classmate. Okay, I'm not joking anymore. The trick was useless, and Lynn could only bow his hand and admit defeat. But I really need your help to study this time. I can't come over too frequently. As he spoke, he took out a handwritten booklet from his arms and solemnly handed it to his friend, saying, "This is my improved spell that can be used for mental trauma treatment. You are a professional, so I can only rely on you. It's like this again, you always have to throw difficult problems at me. Okay, I'll do my best, but you also have to find time to teach me." Amanda, who was born with nothing to love, took over a thin manual of only a dozen pages, as if taking over a big mountain. Of course. Lynn smiled with satisfaction, vaguely 3 points similar to yesterday's Dumbledore, although he didn't notice it himself. After seeing off the old classmate who pretended to be angry, Lynn looked at the time and sat next to Mrs. Longbottom. Madam, I have something to ask for your opinion on, he pondered his tone and wording, about Hogwarts. Dumbledore wants you to become a professor, and it's not defense against the dark arts anymore, right? Mrs. Longbottom had anticipated and said without looking up. Don't hold grudges against him. He was also weak at the time, and there were too many Death Eaters. You've been working hard, and everyone's doing their best. Frank and the others have this realization. This strong and capable old lady can see everything clearly. Watching her nimble movements, Lynn and Rua pondered. Chapter 6. Return to Hogwarts. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. After the visit and treatment at St. Mungo Hospital, it was Wednesday morning in the blink of an eye. The emotional anchor. Neville should be the most suitable. At the desk, Lynn was studying word by word the records and speculations in Igor's medical magic letters, muttering in contemplation. On the panel in his mind, the progress bar of magic knowledge advanced slightly, verifying his hypothesis. This is also one of the wonderful uses of panels. Beside him, discarded parchment piled up into a small hill, and breakfast was already cold. Suddenly, the crisp sound of the alarm interrupted my thoughts. Looking up, it was already 9 o'clock, 30 minutes short of the agreed time. Taking a few random bites, Lynn changed into a wizard's robe that he hadn't worn in many days, picked up the old magic book that had been on hand, and placed it on his wrist. With a flicker of light, the bracelet, which had been cast a special traceless stretching spell, revealed a room-sized space inside. But when it comes to storing this inconspicuous old book, the situation unexpectedly becomes a bit difficult. Far from being as light and convenient as accessing a wand, it feels like being squeezed at the door, and it takes a lot of effort. Finally, it was accepted. In front of the mirror, Lynn gathered his hair and walked into the fireplace, picked up a handful of flyaway powder, and loudly said, Hogwarts. A green flame rises. Hogwarts, Vice President's Office. Professor McGonagall, who works tirelessly during the holidays, is organizing his deformation course papers and compiling his grades. It is not difficult to see from her serious expression that although she has won the College Cup after many years, the performance of the Little Lions is not optimistic. The polarization is becoming increasingly evident. Not far away, Professor Sprout with mud on his hat was chatting with Dumbledore. The open-minded Sprout just told a joke, which made the old man giggle and make McGonagall frown. Pine. Just as she wanted to remind her two old colleagues to pay attention to their manners, the fireplace lit up with a green flame, and the young wizard walked out with a calm smile. Good morning, Professor Sprout, Principal Dumbledore, Professor McGonagall. Long time no see. He looked around and revisited his old place after many years, seemingly unchanged. Lynn, I've heard about Russia. It's not peaceful over there. You're an honest kid, be careful in everything and don't make any mistakes. After several months, seeing his proud student again, Sprout's mood became even more sunny. His short and chubby body quickly stepped forward and gave Lynn a big hug. Good morning, Eric, welcome back. McGonagall, who had some critical comments about the honest child, couldn't resist his old friend's interest and politely greeted him. She was still pondering about her grades, with a worried expression on her face. But soon, her mood changed from cloudy to sunny. I haven't been back to Hogwarts for a long time. It's a small gesture of goodwill, teachers must accept it. The bracelet lit up again, and two exquisite gift boxes landed in Lynn's hand. Is this? The ribbon on the gift box automatically loosens, revealing its true appearance. The magical power that permeates the dense patterns has made the knowledgeable authority of the transformation technique widen their eyes. Professor McGonagall, this magical gold coin was found in the Guishuang ruins deep in the Hindu Kush mountains. It has ancient shape-shifting techniques on it, so it's a bit wasteful to leave it with me. A master like you is more suitable for studying it. Lynn's modesty and praise were just right, making it difficult for McGonagall to refuse. Your talent for shape-shifting is very high, don't be humble, Lynn. If we have the opportunity, we can study together. McGonagall's smile on his face was very helpful, even the papers on the table were not so unpleasant. I have heard of your story, it's amazing, and we are all proud of you. Sprout is much more calm. Looking at the top-quality solitary grass specimen that Lynn specifically found, knowing her true abilities, she simply happily put away the gift and looked at Dumbledore in a conspicuous manner, ignoring the old man's embarrassment. As the Dean of Hufflepuff for many years, although she never competes or grabs, her protection is more direct than anyone else. On the contrary, Dumbledore, who was empty-handed, was at a loss. He was also a master of shape-shifting and his heart was itching uncontrollably. Professor Dumbledore is one of the strongest wizards and researchers in the world, and I can't think of what you need, so I can only bring my greetings. With an undisguised little revenge, Lynn said seriously. While speaking, I still couldn't forget to reach out and tease the dozing phoenix, handing over an expensive herb. The abundant magic in the herb made it very useful, allowing Lynn to caress his head and show a comfortable expression in coordination. Okay. Professor Albus Dumbledore suffered tremendous mental damage and was unable to recover. It wasn't until I saw Lynn pull out the Honey Duke gift box from the bracelet that I became happy again. 4 people sit opposite each other on the coffee table in the reception room. Hagrid still likes strong liquor so much, but this brandy does have a good taste and is truly the water of life. Just a slight sip, Lynn couldn't help but praise it. Although it's morning, his taste of wine is not weak at all, which has been a hobby for many years. Hagrid would be very happy to hear that, but unfortunately he is not at school now. Now it's only Mrs. Hodge who can accompany him to have a drink. Dumbledore politely paused. He prefers sweet drinks over alcohol. The implied meaning is already very clear. Sprout also said, Baysida complains to me every day about the pressure and wants you to share it. She didn't intend to persuade anything, but she also had some expectations. Eric, you are a promising wizard, and the conditions at Hogwarts are not particularly favorable to you, McGonagall said. But I look forward to you imparting your talents to students. There is no more suitable candidate for this course than you. And on the way of exploring the mysteries of magic, perhaps we can communicate and inspire each other, right? Dumbledore smiled and blinked his eyes, not at all like a centenarian, but rather like a vibrant young man. But from the perspective of insight into human hearts, he indeed possesses a keen and profound insight that spans centuries. UU reading www.uukangshu.net, I will consider accepting this teaching position. Without much hesitation, Lynn had already made a decision before coming. Not to mention Dumbledore's request, from a utilitarian perspective, teaching at Hogwarts is also one of the good choices. The accumulation of 11 years requires sedimentation, which is crucial and has a positive effect on taking that crucial step. The massive collection of books at Hogwarts may be helpful. But he didn't directly agree, but changed his tone in Dumbledore's joyful gaze and said, I have a few requests. Dumbledore listened attentively. Lynn raised his first finger and said, First of all, I want to independently organize a professors' club. This is the sacred right of the professor, Dumbledore said without hesitation. Next is the second finger. Secondly, I want to break the pairwise combination mode of the college and conduct the Busbarton grade class. McGonagall nodded and said, as long as Professor Barbling agrees, the venue and time are not a problem. Finally, there is the third finger. Finally, I will not participate in your plans based on prophecy. And I will act according to my principles. I cannot rule out contact with people you value. The first two are just incidental, and the last point is the key. Lynn's tone is firm and there is no intention of discussing. I thought you would make more demanding demands. Dumbledore stood up without hesitation and extended his big hand. On behalf of Hogwarts, I welcome you, Professor Eric. Holding hands together, one is full of traces of time, and the other carries the vitality of youth. On Professor McGonagall's desk, a small mountain of test papers swayed slightly. A gust of warm and humid wind blew outside the window. Shortly after the holiday began, Hogwarts welcomed its first new professor of the year. Chapter 7. The Son of the Prophecy of the Burrow. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Tisk, Hogwarts' teaching level remains worrying as always. Looking at the transcript unfolding on the table, Lynn understood Professor McGonagall's subtle gaze as he parted ways. It has been several days since he returned from Hogwarts, and with a responsible attitude, Lynn stayed up all night and finally gained a basic understanding of students in the 6th grade of school. The scale of Hogwarts and the Wizarding Society is not as small as previously known. It may not even reach the bottom line of generational change. The annual student population of 200 to 300 people covers more than half of the wizarding population in the UK. Some will also attend other schools, such as Busbarton or Demstrong, which enroll students throughout Europe. Even many wizards are adopting the traditional apprenticeship model. Although it is not conducive to finding a livelihood. But overall, for the British Wizarding Society with tens of thousands of people, this education model is still sufficient. To get to the point, let's return to teaching at Hogwarts. Simply put, it is polarization. Every grade has outstanding and promising students. But more people are wasting their time in courses with severely inadequate levels of teaching standardization. Especially the dark magic defense technique that has been cursed for decades. As for ancient texts such as Niwen, or new subjects such as magic texts and ancient magic courses, which were once elective courses, it is hard to bear to look directly at. From language elective courses that assist in reading ancient literature to comprehensive compulsory courses that combine theory and practice, I believe this year's students will have an unforgettable experience. Although this may not necessarily be a concept that symbolizes positive emotions. Percy Weasley, Doris Foley, Boyce Springhall, Hermione Granger. One by one, their names turned into black circles on parchment, some recognized as top students, while others were not as well known. Cedric Diggory, the future is limitless. In the end, a handsome face appeared in front of Lynn, causing his expression to slightly ease. As he waved his hand, a notebook without any decoration, with the words Stargazer written on the cover, landed on the table. He picked up a feather pen, opened the last page, and wrote down lines of text. Surprisingly, the ink marks disappeared as soon as they fell, and the paper remained as smooth as new. Lynn wrote it step by step, until a dozen or so names were written one by one and then dissipated. Woohoo! With a cheerful light shout, Lynn seemed to have completed some remarkable project, spreading his arms and enjoying the sunshine. The rest can be handed over to Faye for handling, it's a holiday. It's time to treat yourself a bit. Would you like to have steak or stewed lamb? Or open another bottle of good wine? Aha! How could I forget? I forgot to give this bottle of wine to Hagrid. Why don't I just drink it myself? Although Russians are not good at anything, the wine is pretty good. Maybe this is the talent of people in cold places. Sometimes lively, sometimes jumping, Lynn and shuttled back and forth in the spacious room, completely different from his gentle and elegant demeanor in front of others. Except for their closest good friend, anyone else who sees him like this would probably be shocked to see his jaw drop. The kind of broken filter. The calendar on the wall flipped page by page, symbolizing the passage of time. This is a small sense of ritual in Lynn's life, as well as respect for Muggle society in life, just like the house he lives in. A few days ago in the afternoon, it was the same owl from last time who came with the appointment letter approved by the school board of directors. After a full meal, he left with the list of new school year textbooks drafted by Lynn, marking a successful end to his career. Although some of the school directors may not be in a good mood when they see his name, it obviously does not affect him. After organizing a long-lost party and sharing the news with friends still in the UK, an idea that had been temporarily put on hold was brought back to the agenda. It's almost the end of July, even in the UK, the weather is a bit hot. Early that morning, after sending out Neville's birthday gift, he leisurely left home, found a deserted alley, and launched the phantom transformation. Although Fei-Lu Fan is more convenient, he still prefers long-distance phantom shape-shifting and phantom development. There is no other reason, but taking the opportunity to travel and accumulate some precious proficiency. Even the smallest mosquito legs are still flesh, let alone the fact that spells like Phantom Shift require accumulation over time, even for top-skilled players like him. Since obtaining the proficiency panel, for many years, those spells that he valued have been inaccessible, limited by the level of magical knowledge, and many spells that he once didn't pay much attention to have been deliberately strengthened by him, including Phantom Shift. It's better to say that this is his 10 years of accumulation and heritage. The distance from Birmingham to Devonshire is about the same as London. But for those who visit friends, it's just a stone's throw away. The clock sets back slightly, adjacent to Surrey County in London. Under the night, Privet Drive is particularly quiet. In the pitch-black room, exhausted and hungry Harry lay on the bed, sleeping restlessly and having nightmares. Suddenly, the few iron bars outside the window that Uncle Vernon had arranged for someone to install trembled violently, and the sound of creaking woke him up. "Don't disturb me. Stop. I want to sleep." Blindly opening his eyes, he saw the familiar figure through the moonlight scattered through the window. Red hair, long nose, and freckles on the face that can be distinguished even at night. Ron Weasley, a knight of the 20th century, was riding a steel horse and came to rescue his poor friend under the moonlight. Although the real knight may be his two brothers responsible for driving. "Step on the gas, Fred. Kid, don't try to escape. See you next summer." In a critical moment, the Weasley family's magical car rushed towards the moon and rescued Harry from being trapped. Faced with Uncle Vernon's hoarse roar, Harry shouted loudly, laughing uncontrollably. After a month of painful summer vacation, he breathed in the free air again. Hedwig flapped her wings and flew high, gliding beside them like a ghost, happily spreading her wings. Inside the car, 4 people leaned back in their seats, laughing uncontrollably. Even for prank experts Fred and George, tonight's experience was thrilling enough to make them forget the storm they might encounter upon returning home. Harry was also entangled by the eager Ron after a brief excitement, revealing his experience to the fullest. From Dobby's appearance, to his warning, and then to the smashed pudding in Uncle Vernon's imprisonment, the original text, without embellishment, still plunged the other 3 into a long silence. For these inexperienced children, this story is indeed a bit scary and suspicious. But relying solely on the 4 of them, without Miss Granger's real brain to provide advice, it is obvious that it is impossible to find the key point of the problem, and at most, it can only point the finger at the versatile scapegoat Malfoy and his family. After a joint condemnation, the situation turned upside down. The old Muggle car sped through the night sky until a red glow appeared on the eastern horizon. The village of Ottery St. Catchpole is not far apart. Looking down from mid-air, a crooked building stands in a corner of the village, with 4 or 5 chimneys on top. Perhaps. Was this house really built by magic? Harry muttered in his heart, but he didn't feel ugly. Instead, he felt a hint of warmth. The car landed next to the dilapidated garage, revealing a corner of the red sun among the trees. It's dawn. Chapter 8. Professor Eric's Home Visits. You are listening at novelfull.audio. This is my home, right in the village. It's not very good, Ron said. No, this is simply amazing, Harry responded happily and sincerely as he thought of Privet Drive. That's great, Ron breathed a sigh of relief. Have you heard about it? We're going to add another course this year, Ancient Chinese like Niwen, which has become a compulsory course. It seems like there was a mention of. During Easter, right? In Harry's memory, the campus life at Hogwarts was already very distant. Moreover, compared to the magnificent, magic stone adventure, the changes in the curriculum are not within the scope of this little lion's attention. Mrs. Barbling's class is very boring, with all kinds of literature. Perhaps you will need our skipping candy. George walked forward, directing the parking while winking at Harry. For Harry's sake, little Ronnie, I'll give you a discount. Fred also tiptoed up, took the conversation tacitly, pointed to the door of the burrow, and lowered his volume. Now we quietly go upstairs until Mom comes to call us for breakfast, and then Ron runs downstairs and shouts, "Mom, who's here?" She won't notice our car. Do you understand? Harry and Ron nodded like chicks pecking at rice, closely following the twins and secretly sneaking into the room. "Harry, come with me," Ron whispered, "I'll just sleep in." Bang! Before he could finish speaking, he bumped his head into George's back. Feeling a faint murderous aura, he turned around and stood still like his brother, his body trembling slightly unconsciously. Harry can guarantee that he saw Ron's face turn so green for the first time. Behind him, the chickens and ducks scattered in the yard, and Harry was surprised to see the kind and chubby woman transform into a sword-toothed tiger with a wide-open mouth. Although he had only seen it in books. "Ah," Fred said. "Oh my goodness," George said. "We're done," Ron concluded objectively. When the sun rose completely from the horizon, the half-tired Weasley brothers and the enthusiastic Harry walked into the garden. "If I find another goblin during my inspection, just wait and see." The roar still lingered in their ears, and the three brothers yawned and complained, but they didn't dare to slow down at all. The goblins screamed and struggled, but in vain. They were easily thrown 20 feet away and landed in a field outside the hedge. "I don't know what kind of tricks ancient Rooneywan would do. I'm an Englishman and I don't do archaeology. It's really inexplicable." Working nimbly, Ron resumed the previous topic with a lively expression. "Rooneywan. Ron, I can't pretend not to hear that. If you say it at school, I should deduct points from Gryffindor." Harry was about to agree when a pleasant male voice sounded from his side. He turned his head and a pair of clear amber eyes appeared in his sight, with a faint smile. "Uncle Eric. You came so early today." Before Harry could express his confusion, Ron had already casually shaken off the obstructing goblin and didn't find himself covered in dirt. He flew up and prepared for a hug. Then he was stopped. The soft magic blocked his dirty little hands from a distance of more than 10 centimeters from Lynn. "Why don't you wash your hands?" "I just changed my clothes." Hey. Wait a minute." Ron scratched his head casually, realizing something behind the scenes. His eyes widened wide. "What did you just say about point deductions?" Fred and George, who had not heard Lynn's greeting, also walked over. "That's right. It's just what you think." Lynn reached out and poked Ron on the forehead. "From September onwards, you should call me Professor Eric. Unfortunately, I am the professor you mentioned for inexplicable archaeology, even though it has been renamed Magic and Ancient Magic." The high-pitched screams, mixed with excitement and disbelief, echoed over the rough dwelling. Harry's small face was filled with great confusion. Now he hasn't figured out who the man he's meeting for the first time is. Seems like the new professor at Hogwarts. Looking at Lynn's neat muggle outfit, which is rare among wizards, he tilted his head. "I can't believe Muggle has such a magical thing. Your vision is just like always." In the kitchen and living room where the shantytown was connected, Arthur Weasley, who had just sat paralyzed, seemed to be twisted up, his face glowing red, and he couldn't help but praise Lynn. He has a rare item that Lynn only recently obtained from Finland. The first 2G network phone in human history. Cough cough cough. Fred coughed fiercely, frowning and making eyes. Following his son's gaze, Mr. Weasley saw the dark cloud on his wife's face and quickly said, "It's not right for you to drive this car out to pick up Harry without permission, children. You must take it as a warning. This at least indicates that the renovation was very successful and the safety is also guaranteed." Just pay attention next time, Lynn said in a timely manner, calmly calming Mrs. Weasley's anger. In front of the guests, Molly couldn't say anything and could only snort coldly as she walked into the kitchen, fiddling with the new kitchen utensils brought by Lynn. Lynn always brings gifts that happen to be her and her husband's favorites, and this time is no exception. I knew Uncle Eric would definitely be able to handle it. Ron happily leaned back on the sofa and whispered to Harry. Who is this Eric? Sir? Harry asked as he looked at Lynn and Arthur, who were chatting and laughing. He is an old friend of his parents and often comes to our house. He always brings us a lot of delicious and fun things, and he is a very talented person. Ron tried hard to exhaust his limited vocabulary in his mind. Fred joked, in my mother's eyes, he's probably the most powerful wizard besides Lockhart, super versatile. But it's even worse than Lockhart. She worships him from the bottom of her heart, George added with a wicked smile, reminding Harry of the book that Mrs. Weasley had recently drawn out. It seems like it's called Gideon Lowart Teaches You to Eliminate Household Pests or something. He is indeed a handsome man, even from a male perspective. With this thought in mind, he shifted his gaze to Lynn, who was chatting and laughing with Mr. Weasley, and secretly compared. It seems that Professor Eric still looks better. Especially those eyes, seeing everyone seems to have a three-part smile, making people unconsciously feel a sense of closeness. UU reading www.uukangshu.net. Let's go. Ron tugged at Harry's sleeve and reminded him softly, don't let Mom come to her senses, or else we'll be scolded again. Uncle Eric won't be able to save us then. Oh. Okay. Harrison stood up from the ground, ready to go upstairs with Ron, but before he could even walk halfway, Professor Eric's gaze shifted from Mr. Weasley. To be precise, it was transferred to several Weasley and him who were rushing to flee. Don't rush to leave, I happen to do a home visit for you before the start of school today. Lynn looked so gentle, but it gave Harry an inexplicable strange feeling. It's like encountering those strict teachers at school while still living on Privet Drive. Fortunately, just as his heart was trembling, Percy walked down the stairs. First. Senior Eric. You're here. I've practiced the spell you taught me last time, but I'm still a bit confused. As soon as he saw Lynn, he showed a surprised expression. Good morning, Percy. Lynn's eyes showed a hint of appreciation. I think we can discuss it later. Of course, there will be a lot of time after returning to Hogwarts. Do you mind joining my club? Hey. Are you saying Hogwarts Professor Club? Percy, who always followed the rules, rushed into the living room without even paying attention to her younger brother squeezing past. Lynn stood up and said, yes, I will serve as your professor of magic and ancient magic. I remember you received an O in ancient runic, so I think you will participate in my advanced class, right? Of course. It's a great honor. In Mrs. Weasley's doting gaze, her most proud son appeared to be greatly flattered. Chapter 9. Harry's New World. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Harry can guarantee that he has never seen a better home than the Burrow. The dazzling orange-yellow in Ron's room. Posters of the Chaudhry artillery team can be seen everywhere. Fred and George, who always come to joke with themselves. As soon as she saw her, Ginny blushed and ran away, delicate like a doll. Even the ghoul who always knocks on the pipe makes him feel happy. This is completely different from the life on Privet Drive. At the dinner table in the evening, Harry's mood was not affected by the magic books piled up on the sofa. Even if he doesn't really enjoy reading, especially the ancient texts known for their dryness, such as the NI language textbooks. Magic Illustrated Talisman Collection Introduction to Ancient Magic Script Magic Dictionary Magic Phonetic Table. In the past, whenever I saw the title of a book, I felt that the big words seemed to come alive under the influence of a good mood, especially the heavy textbook placed at the top with the name Lynn Eric written on it. The Transformation of Magic Scripts. Modern applications of ancient magic. Unlike the old-fashioned classic textbooks, this book has a lively appearance, with unknown symbols jumping like soft feathers, stirring his heart and giving him the impulse to open them directly. But looking at Lynn, who was discussing a seemingly mysterious curse with Percy, he felt that it was impolite and could only press his expectations to fight against grilled chicken legs. Eating with Ron was full of oil. Out of the corner of her eye, I saw Ginny, perhaps nervous. She accidentally dropped her sleeve on the plate, smeared it with some butter, and her beautiful little face turned red until the roots of her hair. Fortunately, only he noticed, and it was very cute. He gave the little girl an encouraging smile and turned his head to gaze at Lynn, who naturally became the center of the dining table. When Euphemia gave me this phone, I had a premonition that Muggle society was about to undergo a dramatic change. After answering Percy's confusion, Lynn took out a cell phone identical to the gift and said solemnly, "Mrs. Weasley has little trust in Muggle technology, which is the norm for pure-blood wizards. But her husband firmly believes it." "What's the meaning of the internet you're talking about?" "Oh yes, the internet." Arthur, who carefully scrutinized his phone and cherished it as a treasure, was full of curiosity. "Speed, the speed of information exchange." Lynn Eric said firmly, "You know, I have many Muggle friends who are doing similar work. Now it's just text and sound, but with the development of technology, there will be images, and even larger scale information. This will be faster and more detailed than owls and guardians. Like on the phone, Professor Eric." Harry found the opportunity to speak and suddenly realized that his experience in Muggle society was not completely useless to the wizarding world. "That's it, Harry." Lynn nodded approvingly. Wizards symbolize supernatural individuals, while Muggles are secular groups. Although not absolute, if wizards remain stagnant, they will grow and fall. "Arthur, I hope you can help me study Muggles' information technology, especially its magic, if conditions permit. It will be very useful." Harry looked at Mr. Weasley with an excited expression, lost in thought. "He seems to have something extra in his head, but it's also blurry. Perhaps only Hermione could comprehend this profound thing," he thought. In the following time, he rarely had the opportunity to speak, only listening attentively, occasionally with jokes from Fred and George, and Mrs. Weasley's half-blaming and half-doting criticism. "Luan ancient magic." These two words, which had never appeared before, increasingly aroused his curiosity, and even Ron, who was dozing next to him, leaned against his shoulder without catching his attention. He has increased his expectations for the new semester. Night shrouded the courtyard, and the goblins that had been driven away in the morning had slipped back into the underground cave, making a scumbag sound. "Molly, this is my best meal lately. Thank you for your hospitality. Your craftsmanship is still so good that you are more than enough to be the head chef at any restaurant." At the entrance of the courtyard, looking at the Weasley family as they bid farewell, Lynn deliberately touched his lower abdomen to express gratitude and praise to the enthusiastic hostess. "You always speak so well," Molly smiled brightly, showing her benefits from the inside out. Arthur was also proud of her. "Next time we call Euphemia, we haven't seen her in a long time." "Okay, make sure to bring the invitation," Lynn said with a smile. "She's going to Busbarton now to take over my teaching position." "This is really good news," Arthur slammed Lynn's shoulder hard. "Congratulations to her for us." "Don't worry," Lynn walked outside the creaking wooden door and waved lightly. "See you next time. Also, little ones, remember to preview before school starts, this is a new lesson." At the moment of parting, Professor Eric, who was dedicated to his job, pointed to the suddenly heavy-faced little ones and let out cheerful laughter. Immediately, he transformed into a silhouette and disappeared into the night sky of Devonshire. "Did you all hear that?" Molly crossed her hips, showing the aura of the head of the family. "Everyone's textbooks are in the house, and school is still a month away. You can't forget your homework, understand?" With a command, Weasley's happy summer vacation came to an end ahead of schedule, with only Percy showing her what she should have done, appearance, causing Fred and George to pounce inwardly from an invisible angle to their mother and third brother. Fred. George. What are you whispering about? The mother's roar proves that as a son, it is difficult to conceal something. The twins shook their heads frantically, not daring to explode in front of their angry mother. They just moved silently towards Harry, trying to hide their tall body behind Harry, who was still a small stature. Of course, this is just in vain. But for Harry's sake, Mrs. Weasley also decided to show mercy and just glared at them. Yu reading www.uukangshu.net muttered, "These textbooks are not cheap." She quickly returned home and tidied up the bedroom that Harry had made available. Managing such a big family is never easy. Mr. Weasley understood his wife's hardships the most, hugged his two sons who were still a bit dissatisfied, and went home with a smile and conversation. Harry silently followed behind, feeling at home for the first time. Compared to the days on Privet Drive, this place is incredibly happy. Just like a brand new warm world, life instantly has colorful colors. The space in the humble abode may seem narrow, but if squeezed, one can always find a new room. Ron, who still wanted to play wizard chess, sat alone in the small yet cozy room, while Harry nervously and eagerly opened his textbook. That's a gift from Professor Eric to himself, as well as a few gifts from the Weasley family's children. A thick stack, full of textbooks and reference books for the new course he had not yet been exposed to. Thinking of the new vocabulary and concepts he heard today, he lightly took out the top book and opened the front page. Magic is mystery to Harry Potter, may you always have the courage to explore the unknown. Lynn Eric. The beautiful floral characters caught his eye, as if carrying some kind of magic that made him unconsciously lift his head and look at the starry sky outside the window. The moonlight is bright, but the starlight is dim. Under the light, he continued to flip backwards. Just like opening the door to a new world and tentatively extending a little toe inside. He, Harry Potter, is a brave young man who explores the unknown. This night, the lights were turned off very late. Chapter 10. Lynn's Nemesis. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After visiting the humble abode, Lynn N had a brief leisure time. Before the start of the school year, he didn't have much socializing. He either prepared his lessons with ease every day, adjusted Busbarton's experience slightly, and prepared to deal with students with distinctive personalities like Hogwarts. He also wandered around the city to observe cultural traces in various regions. In addition to diligent research in magic, this is one of his ways to cultivate his character. In terms of cultural diversity and openness, Birmingham is the best in the UK and even Europe. The main reason Lynn settled here is also this. He is undoubtedly an enlightened wizard, and his identity in his past life has made him never believe that Muggles are fundamentally different from wizards. Both sides just have different abilities and live in two societies, that's all. Life passes quickly, and the stacking speed of parchment files is faster. The magic passed down from the era of King Igor gradually converged into the experience bar of magical knowledge in the mind, driving the turtle to move forward at high speed for a long time. In the blink of an eye, the ordinary Wednesday of August 12th arrived as scheduled. The night before, Lynn stayed up for most of the night, imagining a completely new magical path for Gwen's magic. Exhausted, Lynn slept soundly. I didn't wake up even after 3 strokes of the sun. Around 10 o'clock, the sunlight outside the window finally shone on the bed, slightly dazzling and pulling him out of his wonderful dream. Reluctantly opening his eyes, he suddenly realized something was missing in front of him, as he had planned to pull up the blanket and sleep for a while. The tip of the nose twitched slightly, and a familiar aroma rushed in. That's the faint scent of shampoo. The blurred vision gradually became clearer. The first thing that catches the eye is the dazzling golden long hair like a waterfall. There is also a pair of beautiful and lazy brown eyes that look like cats. The raised eyes have a soft and prickly tail, charming and agile. Euphemia Fox, the most familiar name in this world, comes to mind. I'm sure I haven't woken up yet. Lynn decisively closed his eyes and lifted his hands up from the corner. But avoiding is useless. Before he could hide his ears and steal the bell, his slender and powerful jade hand was already pinched on his wrist. Am I scary? Quiet words are like stones falling onto the surface of a lake, stirring up waves in circles. Lynn's heart was filled with an alarm clock. Of course not. It's just a surprise. He sat up suddenly. Good morning, Faye. Is there anything to do with coming to my house so early? Thinking of his actions, he felt a bit lacking in confidence in front of his long-time friends, calling him a nickname that only his closest friends would use, and his smile was slightly stiff. I can't see any surprises. Besides, are you sure you should say good morning now? Euphemia just gave him a faint glance before sitting back, gently lifting her feet and swaying her delicate high heels in a very regular manner. Has it already been so late? Subconsciously, I glanced at the clock hanging on the wall and regained my rationality. He quickly got out of bed, waved his wand, and the kitchen jingled. In no time, 2 warm cups of milk flew into the bedroom and landed on the desk. I'm sorry, Faye. I suddenly had an idea last night that I slept too late. He explained in a slightly hurried tone, suddenly taken aback. Hey. Why is the draft paper missing? I didn't pack it yesterday. Because it was me who cleaned it up. You threw it all over the place, it's really unsightly. Euphemia picked up the milk and sipped it lightly. It seems that someone has completely forgotten how to throw all the difficult things to me and pretend that nothing happened. Sure enough. This guy is here to settle accounts with me. Lynn was startled and his brain was running rapidly. Ding! A small light bulb lit up above his head, and in a hurry, he found a great reason. Among these people, there are already a few reserve members of Stargazers, and you must be more familiar with them than I am. You know, I have never been good at handling such things, so I still have to leave it to the omnipotent Fae to rest assured. Amber eyes filled with sincerity. However, Miss Fox, who has been together for almost 20 years, is not so easy to fool. You're just thinking about it all, and you're too lazy to be outrageous. With a glance at Lynn's careful thoughts, Euphemia threw out a booklet with disdain. The things you want, don't do it again. Lynn opened it and saw that the name of the day had become detailed information. From family background, personality traits to areas of expertise in magic, it is meticulously analyzed. This way, I have a clear idea. Thank you very much, Faye. I know you are the most reliable one. Pleasantly putting away the manual, Lynn generously praised it, but only attracted coquettish glances. Tell me, why did you suddenly decide to go back? We didn't discuss it with you, but the plan needs to be adjusted. Sophia, who was gentle, drank all the milk, lightly propped her chin, and looked steadily at Lynn, his bright eyes reflecting his shadow. Ever since he was in school, Lynn has felt a chill in his heart every time he was stared at like this. The reason is simple, he is not good at dealing with trivial matters and always throws all such things to his most reliable friend. This has been the case for over a decade. This also leads to him always being short of breath when facing Euphemia. Just like how Dumbledore dared not appear in front of McGonagall at the beginning of the school season. Well, it's Dumbledore, along with the sons of Frank and Alice. Lynn raised his hand and surrendered, rather than watching him push the children into the fire pit one by one. I think maybe I can do something. And besides, I can't go get that thing from Big Hangleton, nor can you. You have to find a suitable person to go. This old man may be good, but he's also over 100 years old and not considered a premature death. Excuses. Bai Xingxing's finger pressed against Lynn's head, and Euphemia's tone was light and light. As I thought, you're still the same. You're more sarcastic than anyone else, and when you do something, you're not willing to let go of anything. Greedy guy. Don't hit the nail on the head like this, it's very damaging to friendship. Lynn sighed helplessly, having no way to deal with his old friend. In school, it seems like it hasn't changed since graduation. Back in the day, he was a formidable sophomore and swept the college in his third year. However, in front of this sharp Ravenclaw, he repeatedly suffered setbacks, like encountering a nemesis, and even gradually became a laughingstock among his friends. I'm just stating the facts. The already imperceptible smile flashed by, and Euphemia waved her wand lightly. A few clothes flew out of the wardrobe, forming a casual outfit that floated neatly in front of Lynn N. It's time to set off. Starting. Lynn N looked bewildered. Where are we going? Bada, what exactly have you memorized in your head? The heel of the shoe fell heavily to the ground, and Euphemia's eyebrows turned upside down. Didn't we agree to go to Diagon Alley today? By teaching aids, take care of the wand. Do you think I came specifically to calm you down? Ah. I'm sorry, I've been living a confused life lately. Lynn patted his forehead, apologizing, and hurriedly ran into the bathroom. Wait for me a few minutes. The appearance of fleeing in despair was very disheveled, but it made Euphemia laugh happily. She had seen this scene at the Hogwarts library 17 years ago. Years have passed, my appearance has changed, and the scenery is no different. It's another long-distance phantom shape-shifting. Are you just so fond of showing off your magic? At the entrance, looking at Lynn N, who was well-groomed and had a meticulous hairstyle, Euphemia sighed. Lynn smiled and said, exercising is never bad. A few 100 kilometers, I'm not that precise. Euphemia rolled her eyes. It's okay, I'll take you. Lynn took it for granted, be careful. Before she could finish speaking, the rotation of space enveloped her. My eyes have not yet opened, and the noisy noise has rushed to my ears. Her delicate eyelashes trembled slightly, and what caught the eye was the bustling Brokeback bar. Tom, 2 glasses of flame whiskey, let's have it for lunch. Help me prepare it. Pulling Euphemia, who had not yet recovered from the squeezing sensation of space, Lynn loudly greeted the boss, strode to the wall, tapped a few times, and stepped into it.